On September 11th, 2006, thousands from all over the world gathered in New York City, New York. They wore black shirts, reading Investigate 9/11, and held banners that read, "Ask questions, demand answers." This day marked the 5th anniversary of the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. Although the 9/11 Commission report had been published over 2 years prior, many Americans and citizens worldwide remained convinced that the truth was being withheld from the public. Why? Why was a growing percentage of the world population becoming increasingly skeptical of the events of September 11th? Was it a natural inclination towards believing the worst about the United States government? Or was it a legitimate concern that only grew more powerful with time? The 9/11 Truth Movement includes academics, engineers, physicists, firefighters, intelligence officials, and some of the very people whose lives have been shattered since September 11th. Were they all delirious?
You should not be here. No, you've got it all wrong. We're honoring the fallen heroes from 9/11.
As are we.
No, you're not. No, you are not.
I feel so uncomfortable.
I'm sorry.
That next year, I'm not coming here.
Or were they a concerned group of individuals taking the necessary steps to prevent the United States from slipping into its darkest era yet? Was September 11th a surprise attack on America by 19 Islamic terrorists? Or something else entirely?
George Bush has spent an uncomfortable day with his people trying to explain away why he failed to pass on warnings the White House had received before September the 11th that terrorists were planning to hijack American aircraft. What happened that day has cast a shadow over just about every area of American life. Now one of the country's best-known journalists has said that the American response to the so-called war on terrorism has created a climate of effective censorship in a land claiming to be the home of free speech.
There's never been an American war, small or large, in which access has been so limited as this one. The belief runs so strong in both the political and military leadership that those who control the images will control public opinion.
Does it suggest that there was somebody on the inside? He kind of compared it to the Godfather story, you know, where the gun was placed in the men's room.
There is also a possibility this could be some kind of inside job.
May it have been an inside job? Might these people have gotten help from the inside?
I was speculating about that along with others early this morning, but now there's a lot more evidence that suggests it's almost certainly the case.
It's an obscene comparison, I'm not sure like it, but there was a time in South Africa that people would put flaming tires around people's necks if they dissented. The fear is that you'll be necklaced here. You have a flaming tire of lack of patriotism put around your neck. Now, it's that fear that keeps journalists from asking the toughest of the tough questions and to continue to bore in on the tough questions so often.
People ought to stay out of our business.
A country that hides something is a country that is afraid of getting caught.
And in particular, this Bush administration, who is as tight with Saudi Arabia as you can get. The president's father used to stay with the bin Laden family when he would go to Saudi Arabia.
In the past, though, the FBI has sometimes made problems worse by ignoring or denying them.
FBI management intentionally and repeatedly thwarted and obstructed my attempts to launch a more comprehensive investigation to identify and to neutralize terrorists. To the families and victims, of September 11th. On behalf of John Vincent, Barry Carmody, and myself, we're sorry.
I want to say quietly, but as forcefully as I can, that I hope this doesn't go any further. It's gone too far already. I am appalled by it.
On September 13th, the United States government declares that it has overwhelming evidence that bin Laden is responsible for the attacks. The Taliban offers to hand over Osama bin Laden if the United States can provide evidence.
Our position in this regard is that if America have evidence and proofs, they should produce it, and we are ready for the trial of Osama bin Laden in the light of evidence.
Are you willing to hand Osama bin Laden to the United States or not?
No. Without evidence, no.
September 23rd, 2001.
The Secretary of State said the administration would soon be able to document its case in public against the Al-Qaeda network and Osama bin Laden.
And I think it'll be persuasive.
By the next day, the White House was already backpedaling.
But is there any plan to present public evidence so that, the average citizen, not just Americans, but people all over the world, can understand the case against
Well, I
bin
think
Laden?
as Secretary Powell said, there's hope to do that and to do so in a timely fashion over some course of time. But I think the American people also understand that there are going to be times when that information cannot immediately be forthcoming, and the American people seem to be accepting of that.
It seems as though you're asking everyone to trust you.
This information has yet to be provided to the public. Instead of taking credit, bin Laden denies involvement in the attacks 3 times. December 13th, the Department of Defense releases a videotape allegedly discovered in a house in Jalalabad, Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden describes the attacks along with Khaled al-Harbi. American mainstream media and even President Bush would portray this videotape as absolute proof of his guilt. International establishments question the authenticity of the tape. December 26th, 2001. A Taliban official claims that he has attended the funeral of Osama bin Laden. The next day, a video believed to be recorded on November 19th is broadcast, in which bin Laden praises the attack, but takes no responsibility. The next bin Laden video would not appear until October 29th, 2004, days before the presidential election. The video is described as the clearest claim of responsibility for 9/11. And when questioned why bin Laden's most wanted poster does not indict him for 9/11, the chief of investigative publicity for the FBI, Rex Toome, replied,
9/11 is not mentioned on bin Laden's most wanted poster is because the FBI has no hard evidence connecting Osama bin Laden to 9/11. Clearly, I couldn't really believe what I had just heard, so I repeated it. And he said, yes, that is correct. The FBI has no hard evidence connecting Osama bin Laden to 9/11.
What evidence do they have? 2 bags belonging to Muhammad Atta checked in at Portland Airport but failed to make Flight 11 at Boston, containing a 757 video tour and flight manual, an Arab-English dictionary, a handheld flight computer, a Quran, and his will. Marwan al-Sheikh's rental car, discovered at Logan Airport, containing an Arabic flight manual, an airport restricted area pass, and documents from Huffman Aviation. Nawaf al-Hazmi's rental car, discovered at Dulles Airport, containing Muhammad Atta's instructions, a check for a flight school in Phoenix, 4 drawings of a 757 cockpit, a knife, and maps of Washington and New York. Satam al-Sakami's passport, discovered below the Twin Towers.
Well, Dan, not far from here, a passerby found the passport of one of the hijackers.
The list goes on. A former high-level intelligence official commented to New Yorker magazine, "Whatever trail was left deliberately for the FBI to chase."
They used hundreds of different payphones and cell phones, often with prepaid calling cards that are extremely difficult to trace. And they made sure that all the money sent to them to fund their attacks was wired in small amounts to avoid detection.
Small amounts? Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed, the director of the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, the ISI, was reported to have wired $100,000 to Muhammad Atta in August 2001. This transfer was facilitated by Saeed Sheikh, the man who allegedly kidnapped and murdered Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, who is investigating the ties between the ISI and Islamic militants.
And the Pakistanis, of course, if you know your history, have only been a couple of degrees of separation away from the so-called Al-Qaeda hijackers.
The ISI has had a long-standing relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency, dating back to the 1980s with the establishment of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which would evolve into Al-Qaeda.
I focus in on the wire transfer that General Mahmoud Ahmed wired to Muhammad Atta right before 9/11. That's pretty crucial because General Mahmoud Ahmed was actually meeting with key Washington, D.C. insiders, Senator Bob Graham, Porter Goss, the future director of CIA, on the morning of 9/11. And he has a relationship not only with the CIA, but with Dick Armitage at State Department, Mark Grossman at State Department.
Yes. Are you aware of the reports at the time that ISI chief was in Washington on September 11 and on September 10th, $100,000 was wired from Pakistan to these groups here in this area? And why he was here, was meeting with you or anybody in the administration?
I have not seen that report, and he was certainly not meeting with me. Yes?
In the White House transcript of this exchange, which is delivered to the press, the information about the ISI is censored. Bob Graham and Porter Goss will later co-head a joint inquiry which publicly claims that the Bush administration received absolutely no intelligence that could have prevented the attacks. The meeting begins at 8 a.m. over breakfast at the Capitol building and lasts through Flight 175's impact with the South Tower. During his visit, which began on September 4th, Ahmed would also meet with the present CIA director, George Tenet. A month later, after reports of the transfer between himself and Atta, Mahmoud Ahmed retires from the ISI. The 9/11 Commission report will later conclude that they saw no evidence that any foreign government or foreign government official supplied any funding. The Commission decided not only to omit the information, but to deny it entirely.
On page 172 of your report, the 911 report, you state, quote, "The U.S. government has not been able to determine the origin of the money used in the 911 attacks. Ultimately, the question is of little practical significance," end quote. How can you state that the question of who bankrolled the deaths of 3,000 American people on September 11th is, quote, of little practical significance?
Because it costs so little money. That's the awful thing about it. It costs less than $500,000. That's why it was so hard to trace. We were able to find pieces of the $500,000, but it came in very small pieces.
And you said earlier $500,000 to do the 9/11 operation. Well, we know that $100,000 was wired to Muhammad Atta directly from the head of Pakistani ISI.
Well, I'm not aware of $100,000. Pakistan, I think, is the most dangerous country in the world.
Why was there such a vested interest in covering up the transaction between the ISI and Muhammad Atta?
And let's talk about that wire transfer, because Governor Kaine had no basis for denial, because the FBI and the Wall Street Journal confirmed the General Mahmoud Ahmed wire transfer I'm talking about. But the 9/11 Commission deliberately said that funding is not important and assigning blame is not important to them, but it is to us.
Two of the hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Madar, rented an apartment from and lived with an FBI informant. Finally, we were led to believe that the alleged hijackers were fundamentalist Muslims spending their final days preparing for paradise. Yet, in the week before the attacks, a number of them would drink, visit strip clubs, and solicit prostitutes.
By all accounts, Atta and his cousin kept to themselves, except for last Thursday at this bar in Hollywood, Florida. It's believed both men came in, drank heavily, and then refused to pay the bill.
And the guy got like very, very offended, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, I can pay my bill. I'm an airline pilot." And I was like, okay.
Mahed Maked is spotted several times at a porn shop. Hamza Al-Ghamdi ordered a porno in his hotel on September 10th. The mayor of Paterson, New Jersey, states that they are spotted more at go-go clubs than at mosques. Regardless of their actions, some of the hijackers' presence was known as early as 2000.
What did we know? When did we know it?
That's what some congressmen are asking now, and asking quite loudly.
Did we know the year before 9/11 that one of the hijackers was a terrorist threat?
Army Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer has gone public with his charge that Able Danger, a military intelligence project he worked with in 2000, identified Mohammed Atta, even pulled up his picture along with 3 other 9/11 hijackers as possible al-Qaeda members.
We found the identities of 4 of the 9/11 hijackers prior to 9/11.
But he says beginning in September 2000, 3 meetings he set up with the FBI were each canceled by military lawyers. Schaefer also says he remembers telling then 9/11 Commission staff at a meeting in Afghanistan about Atta and what the intelligence unit found back in 2000. And he was surprised that it did not show up in the Commission's report.
I'm told confidently by the person who did move the material over that the 9/11 Commission received 2 briefcase-size containers of documents. I can tell you for a fact that would not be 1/20th of the information that Able Danger consisted of during the time we spent.
A 9/11 Commission spokesman said nothing they got from the Pentagon in early 2004 backed up Schaefer's claim, quote, "None of the documents turned over to the Commission mentioned Mohammed Atta or any of the other future hijackers."
Where is it? Where's the beef? Where's the substance? Where is this mysterious chart that purportedly says that Atta was connected in some real way to these other hijackers? We'd love to see it.
The company responsible for the chart, Orion Scientific Systems, would claim that only 2 charts were produced and that Atta was not present on either one.
Throw them all out, John. These are all the charts. Spread them out. These are all Orion-produced charts. These charts were all done by the data mining efforts. So the Orion Corporation lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee staff. All data mining efforts, and yet the company said to the Senate Judiciary staff, "We don't have any of those charts. They're not ours." Well, here they are. And their logos are on each one of them. Well, Mr. Chairman, at least 2 of the 5 people that were going to appear today were threatened with removal of their security clearances if they continue to talk about this. This is going back.
Are you at liberty to identify who those 2 are?
I will to you. I'd rather do it privately since the Defense Department has chosen not to allow anyone to testify, but I will provide that information to the committee.
For the life of me, I don't understand why, as I understand it, I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I understand the witnesses we assumed we were going to get to hear from the Defense Department have been pulled. They may be or may not be in the room, but have been instructed that they cannot testify. I think that's a big mistake.
This is actually a chart of al-Qaeda and the various cells around the world. Much of this data, most of it was obtained prior to 9/11 by the work of Able Danger. As you see, there is an actual photograph of Mohammed Atta.
What does that depict generally?
It depicts the organizational and activity associations of al-Qaeda operatives that were involved in 9/11 and related events.
And at the time, if the Commission had looked into this in early 2004, the charts that had Mohammed Atta on it still existed. There was a chart in Mr. Smith's office. There was the chart that still should have been in the Defense Intelligence Agency because it wasn't destroyed within Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer's files until the spring of 2004. The same with the chart that Mr. Smith had.
Our support to Able Danger became severely restricted and ultimately shut down due to intelligence oversight concerns. I was supported vigorously by both the LEWA and the INSCOM chain of commands, and we actively worked to overcome this shutdown for the next several months. In the midst of this shutdown, I, along with one of my analysts, Chief Warrant Officer 3 Terry Stevens, were forced to destroy all data, charts, and other analytical products that we had not already passed on to SOCOM related to Able Danger.
Another former DOD official will testify today that he was ordered to destroy up to 2.5 terabytes of data. Now, I don't know what a terabyte of data is, so we contacted the Library of Congress. It's equal to 1/4 of all the entire written collection that the Library of Congress maintains.
Are you in a position to evaluate the credibility of Captain Philpott, Colonel Schaefer, Mr. Westphal, Ms. Preissler, Mr. J.D. Smith as to their credibility when they say they saw Muhammad Atta on a chart?
Yes, sir. I believe them implicitly.
Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, who was the first member of Able Danger to go public, has now been told in writing by the Defense Intelligence Agency that he can't speak to members of Congress or their staff without prior approval. And now a security clearance, which allowed him to deal with classified information, has been pulled. The congressman says Schaefer has been gagged, punished for speaking up.
The official response to Able Danger began in September 2005 with a letter from 9/11 Commissioner Slade Gordon to Senator Arlen Specter. Gordon concludes by saying that since Condoleezza Rice, President Bush, and the White House denied that Able Danger identified the 9/11 hijackers, it never happened. A 6-month investigation by the Senate Intelligence Committee concluded in December 2006 that Able Danger did not identify Muhammad Atta or any other 9/11 hijacker. Can we be certain that the hijackers were radical Muslims on a suicide mission? Or is there a possibility that they were funded and protected in our own country?
Major Deskin?
Yes, ma'am, Sergeant Lorda.
Yes.
I'm just letting you know for information we're having an exercise, SF exercise. We're having a comm out.
Okay.
Guys.
Happy, thanks.
All right, thank you. Back.
Between September 2000 and June 2001, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, would scramble fighter jets to intercept errant aircraft 67 times. Interceptions are routine and usually occur within 10 minutes of a sign of trouble, such as permanently losing radio contact and transponder signal or flying off course. On the morning of September 11th, according to official accounts, 4 commercial airliners would be off course and out of communication, and not one of them would be intercepted.
How is it that on 4 separate occasions on one day that $1 trillion military and intelligence infrastructure could fail?
I don't think anybody could have predicted that these people would take an airplane and slam it into the World Trade Center, take another one and slam it into the Pentagon.
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attacks. Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened. According to this April 2001 Pentagon email, Air Force officials wanted a war game, having a terrorist group hijack a commercial airline and fly it into the Pentagon. The idea was to check response times to launch fighter jets, but according to the Pentagon email, the plan was ultimately rejected by senior Pentagon officials as too unrealistic. Still to come are questions, big questions, about NORAD's response on the day of the attack. Why, despite all the exercises and the planning, Peter, jet fighters were not in place anywhere near New York or Washington.
Quite an amazing story. Many thanks, Brian. Brian Ross.
One drill, called Amalgam Virgo, was conducted on June 1st and 2nd, 2001, and simulated successful terrorist attacks. Its purpose was to focus on unconventional threats, including an airborne hijacking. One plan would simulate the hijacking of a commercial airliner, which would be crashed into the Capitol. The second part of the exercise, which was planned but not executed before 9/11, involved 2 planes with actual pilots on the flight deck. FBI agents would hijack the planes and divert them to secure locations. And on its cover, Osama bin Laden. In fact, multiple war games were underway on 9/11 itself.
The question was, we had 4 war games going on September 11th, and the question that I tried to pose before the Secretary had to go to lunch was whether or not the activities of the 4 war games going on September 11th actually impaired our ability to respond to the attacks.
The answer to the question is no, did not impair our response. In fact, General Eberhart, who was then the commander of North American Aerospace Defense Command, as he testified in front of the 9/11 Commission, I believe he told them that it enhanced our ability to respond. There were 2 CPXs. There was 1 Department of Justice exercise that didn't have anything to do with the other 3, and there was an actual operation ongoing because there was some Russian bomber activity up near Alaska.
So, did the war games ultimately help or hinder our response? September 11th was day 2 of Vigilant Guardian, an exercise staged by the Joint Chiefs and NORAD, which simulated hijacked planes in the northeastern United States. Vigilant Guardian is a branch of Global Guardian, a mass Armageddon exercise being conducted at Offutt Air Force Base in cooperation with NORAD. Originally scheduled to take place in late October, Global Guardian was moved to September. The exercise is reportedly canceled after the second Twin Tower is hit. 3 E-4B Doomsday planes remain airborne.
2 government sources familiar with the incident tell CNN it was a military aircraft, but say the details are classified. This comparison of the CNN video and an official Air Force photo suggests the mystery plane is among the military's most sensitive aircraft, an Air Force E-4B. The E-4B is a state-of-the-art flying command post, built and equipped for one reason: to keep the government running no matter what, even in the event of a nuclear war. Ask the Pentagon, and it insists this is not a military aircraft, and there is no mention of it in the official report of the 9/11 Commission. The Pentagon, the Secret Service, and the FAA all say they, at least for public consumption, had no explanation of the giant plane over the president's house, just as the smoke began to rise across the river at the Pentagon.
Barksdale Air Force Base also participated in Global Guardian. Instead of returning directly to Washington, D.C., President Bush would fly to both Barksdale and Offutt Air Force Base before returning to the White House. Another drill, Northern Vigilance, moved fighter jets to Canada and Alaska to monitor a fleet of Russian MiGs on a training mission. Northern Vigilance also placed inputs onto military radar screens, also referred to as phantoms. Inputs are simulated errant aircraft, which appear real to those participating in the exercise.
We fought many phantoms that day.
3 F-16s from Andrews Air Force Base, located 15 miles from the Pentagon, are flown 180 nautical miles away for a training mission in North Carolina. Fort Belvoir, an Army base 10 miles south of the Pentagon, intended to test security in case of a terrorist attack. Employees in the Office of Emergency Management on the 23rd floor of World Trade Center Building 7 continue preparations for Tripod, a biological attack drill scheduled for September 12th. Finally, the National Reconnaissance Office in Virginia begins a drill at 8:45, conducted by a team from the CIA, in which a plane crashes into their building. Also, a number of war games were being conducted that have yet to be fully disclosed.
Ask about the war games that were planned for 9/11.
Commissioner Gorelick.
Could you please be quiet? We have only a few minutes with General Myers. I'd like to ask a question. General Myers, I'm sorry.
I would ask, please, people in the audience to be quiet if you want to stay here.
Sir, this commission has not answered my questions. I'm walking out. It's a farce. I will. Thank you.
So let me get this straight. On the morning of 9/11, the United States is running drills in which hijacked aircraft go in and out of radar, fighter jets are flown out of the United States, and planes are crashed into buildings. What a coincidence.
And in terms of what motivated me to bring all the aircraft down, as you see one thing happen, that's an accident. When you see two of the same thing occur, it's a pattern. But when you see three of the same thing occur, it's a program. And so at that point, I decided to bring all the aircraft down.
And so, at 9:45, all airborne planes were forced to land. This order applied to all civilian aircraft. Certain military planes were allowed to remain airborne. By 12:16 that afternoon, the FAA managed to ground over 4,000 planes without incident.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
.37, Arlington, Virginia. American Airlines Flight 77 allegedly crashes into the ground floor of the Pentagon. Pentagon authorities will deny that the building had anti-aircraft defense. The FBI arrives within minutes, and the site is declared a federal crime scene, becoming their exclusive responsibility. With the help of civilians, they comb the Pentagon lawn for debris, and within 24 hours, they had confiscated every known video of the attack. On the morning of 9/11, Hani Hanyour and his 4 accomplices traveled to Dulles International Airport outside of Washington, D.C. They had spent the weeks beforehand at the Valencia Motel in Laurel, Maryland, 6 miles from the National Security Agency. All 5 will set off metal detectors and be subjected to additional screening, yet all of them proceed to board American Airlines Flight 77, which is described by the Washington Post as unusually light on passengers. Out of 188 seats, 64 would be filled. In fact, all 4 planes involved in 9/11 would be at approximately 30% capacity. The pilots were Officer David Charlebois and Captain Charles Burlingame. Charles Frank Burlingame III, an aeronautical engineer and a graduate of both the Naval Academy and Top Gun Fighter Pilot School, flew F-4 fighter jets and developed anti-terrorism strategies at the Pentagon before retiring in 1989 to take a job at American Airlines. The hijackers would have only moments to subdue both Charlebois and Burlingame, remove them from the cockpit, and retain control of the airplane. Yet, the plane is hijacked without incident at 8:51 and makes an unauthorized turn to the south 3 minutes later. Flight 77 will fly all the way back from the Kentucky-Ohio border, coasting for another 43 minutes against its flight path before crashing into the Pentagon without any military interception. Had Hani Hanjour wanted to inflict maximum damage, all he had to do was continue his trajectory and nose down into the roof of the Pentagon. Instead, he begins a complicated 330-degree turn, dropping 7,000 feet and exposing himself for an additional 3 minutes.
Todd Lewis is working radar at Dulles Airport.
One of my colleagues saw a target moving from the northwest to the southeast.
And it was just a countdown, 10 miles west.
And she notified the supervisor.
9 miles west.
But nobody knew that was a commercial flight at the time. Nobody knew that was American 77.
What did you think? It was a military flight of some kind?
I thought it was a military flight. I thought that Langley had scrambled some fighters and...
It was almost a sense of relief. This must be a fighter.
Maybe one of them got up there.
It was really moving fast.
It was moving very fast, like a military aircraft might move at a low altitude.
This must be one of our guys, sent in, scrambled to patrol our capital.
The 757 will descend over Columbia Pike, flying adjacent to the Sheraton Hotel, Virginia Department of Transportation, Navy Annex, and fly past the Citgo gas station before crossing Washington Boulevard. 5 light poles are knocked out of the ground. One reportedly strikes a Washington, D.C. taxi driven by Lloyd England. Flight 77 manages to hit the only section that was reinforced to withstand a terrorist attack, including reinforced steel and blast-resistant Kevlar windows an 1.5 inches thick. The renovation, planning for which had begun in 1991, was only days away from completion. Had the plane struck anywhere else, the casualties and damage would have been far greater. An area that normally would have housed up to 5,000 occupants yielded 125 casualties. The Pentagon's outer wall had a hole approximately 20 feet in diameter on the first and second floor, and visible damage 90 feet across the first floor.
I would say if it was 16 feet diameter, 20 feet tops, that's what would start me so curious. As I was trying to find something, there was no marks on the grass. Something never hit the ground. It didn't hit the heliport. I mean, it was a precision or awfully lucky hit. I mean, I don't know how it didn't bounce. I don't know how it hit directly in the side of the building without touching the ground, going as fast as it obviously was going. But I can't believe the thing is more than a garage door. And again, the classic airplane crash has wreckage. I mean, they found the axles from the Ryder truck in Oklahoma City. I can't believe they can't find an engine.
Opinions differ at this point. People that believe a 757 hit the Pentagon, and people that don't. Those that believe a 757 did hit are fueled by the damage path, wreckage outside the building, and eyewitness testimony.
While we were sitting in the office, and all of a sudden we heard some rumbling, something is kind of hitting us. Very imminent things could happen. So we look at each other, and it really, the noise is unbearable. And at the last moment, my brother jumped out the office.
I heard about the very weak jet sound. Looks like just up to here. I just look at the outside, big black wings coming that way. And then I just running out, and then 2-3 seconds, boom!
We're used to seeing planes.
Maybe a 20-passenger corporate jet, no markings on the side.
I saw a plane going down, big plane, commercial liner type.
And I saw this jet coming in, and it was really low, and it was an American Airlines jet. You could read the AA on the side, silver fuselage.
This particular plane was awful low, and as we were coming down on a 395, it came across in front of us, and it was low.
Coming in at a shallow angle like it was landing right into the side of the Pentagon.
It just happened. It was really amazing.
Huge explosion.
So you actually saw the plane impact the side of the building?
Yes, I did.
Just one plane?
Just one plane.
I basically made a turn too early and ended up right in front of the Pentagon on Route 27, which goes just, I didn't even know it was the Pentagon. I mean, I've grown up in this area, but I just am basically never over there. Besides, you can't really tell it's five-sided anyway, so I didn't even know it was a Pentagon. But I was just in traffic. My main focus was that I was late for this service, and we were stuck in totally standstill traffic, just sitting dead still on the highway. And basically, without warning, there was just the sensation of something coming over the top of us. It seems the plane was so low that it hit a light pole that was just on the edge of the highway, on the far side there. Before it came over the highway, it clipped this pole, which I heard ended up being knocked over and hitting a taxi, which was near my car.
Okay, my name is Lloyd England. 9/11, I was driving my car on my way home. This airplane flew over top of my car. It was real close. Something, glass, a loud noise happened. and the pole came through the dashboard, right through the car. I stopped the car in the middle of the street. It didn't stop straight, it stopped at an angle. As far as the plane went through, it didn't come back in until I stopped the car and got out. Then I looked for the plane. There was no plane, but it was quiet. If had nobody seemed to have indicated where something happened, I wouldn't have known. And I was there. I mean, I'm there. And the plane, the wing spread would have been from that house, maybe halfway in my house. And the big wing, the big motors underneath of them. And nothing was left out?
The outer wall will collapse 20 minutes later, leaving a hole approximately 70 feet wide. What hit the building may be important. However, our focus should be on why it was hit in the first place. The section hit was the headquarters of Naval Operations, Naval Intelligence, and the Navy Command Center. Army personnel were also killed. A number of accountants and budget analysts were also present at the time and killed in the attack. According to the 9/11 Commission report, the military was unprepared for the transformation of commercial aircraft into weapons of mass destruction.
Counterterrorism forecaster Marvin Citron authored a report in 1994 for the Department of Defense, warning of Washington's vulnerability to terrorist attack.
We predicted a plane could have crashed into the Pentagon. That's about as specific as you can be. If you made a right turn at the Washington Monument, you could hit the Pentagon. A left turn, you could hit the White House.
Back on October 24th, 2000, the Pentagon conducted MASCOW, a mass casualty exercise which simulated the impact of a Boeing 757 into the building.
I'm very curious, and as time goes by, it makes you more curious as you have time to dwell on the details and all the information that's becoming available. I can't drive my car that well, but I can't imagine somebody just climbing behind the wheel of an airplane and doing what they did and doing it so well. Basically, it was the strangest day I've ever spent in my entire life. It was like in slow motion. I get chills every time I hear the audio. Physically, I swear I get chills every time I watch the video. I can feel the heat. I can smell the fuel, or I can smell the burning. There's been a lot of curiosity, I think, in time, and even for me who was there. I still have questions of, did I really see what I think I saw? You know, when you're led to believe and you think you believe what you think you saw, I think that you begin to buy into it. But the more you dwell on it and the more the evidence comes forward, the questions get larger and larger and larger. I'd like some conclusion. I mean, I'm sure the families would, and I'm sure the military knows a lot more than we do in the government. But I'm just astounded that they don't share more of the information that's available.
Why? When Vice President Dick Cheney was aware of an incoming aircraft up to 50 miles away, were employees allowed to remain in the building? Had a single alarm gone off inside the Pentagon, 125 people would be alive today, and hundreds more would not be suffering.
And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, "Do the orders still stand?" And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, "Of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?"
Norman Minetta's testimony would be completely unreported by the 9/11 Commission. It would also be censored from the online archives of Commission hearings. A spokesperson from the National Archive claimed that it was a technical snafu. The 9/11 Commission will later conclude that Vice President Dick Cheney did not reach the bunker until 9:58.
My main concern is that in your testimony, you stated that Vice President Dick Cheney came into the POEC office at 9:20 when you arrived, and he was already there. He was gone in front of Meet the Press, and he said that he was there at 9:38.
They did that because they'd received a report that an airplane was headed for the White House.
This is Flight 77, which had left Dulles.
Flight 77. It left Dulles, best we can tell, they came initially at the White House.
The plane actually circled the White House?
Didn't circle it, but was headed on a track into it.
Tracking it by radar.
And when it entered the danger zone and looked like it was headed for the White House was when they grabbed me and evacuated me to the basement. The plane obviously didn't hit the White House, turned away and we think flew a circle and came back in and then hit the Pentagon.
Yet the 9/11 Commission report puts in there at 9:58 that morning
58?
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to read it, but it puts him half an hour later. So I don't mean to ask a rhetorical question, but to the best of your recollection, was Vice President Dick Cheney already there at 9:20?
The flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
This was
before flight
before American Airlines went into the Pentagon.
Norm Mineta was in the bunker with Cheney, and so the fact that wasn't in the 9/11 Commission report was rather odd, don't you think? Yeah. Who was that young man? Did anybody ask who that young man was?
How could Dick Cheney, or anyone in the administration, especially after an aide warned him a plane was 50 miles out and 2 planes had already struck the World Trade Center, allow the Pentagon to be struck?
You know, am I prepared to believe that Dick Cheney would be capable of knowing about this kind of attack on the Pentagon, for example, and allowing it to happen? Well, from what I know about Dick Cheney, yeah.
(9:59), New York City, New York. The South Tower of the World Trade Center, 110 stories tall, collapses to the ground in approximately 10 seconds. 29 minutes later, the North Tower follows suit, also collapsing in approximately 10 seconds. Later that evening, at 5:20, World Trade Center Building 7, 47 stories tall, collapses to the ground in under 7 seconds. The official explanation is that falling debris from the North Tower created a series of fires inside the building. Firefighters and eyewitnesses reported a series of explosions before and during the collapses.
And we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
Secondary explosion on Tower 2.
Some sort of explosive device.
We're obviously having a bit of trouble right now maintaining our location because we just heard one more explosion.
There was another major explosion.
Do you know anything about those extra explosions we heard?
No, I do not.
Were they car bombs?
I have no idea, ma'am.
The street shook, and I heard like an explosion.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse? To me, it sounded like an explosion. We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
Not clear now is why this explosion took place.
When there was some sort of collapse or explosion.
From street level, as though it had exploded up, a giant rolling ball of flame, and the firefighters screamed, "Run!"
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building.
You were picked up off the ground.
Physically picked up off the ground.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in. And at that point, there was like fireballs coming up.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that.
About 15 minutes after they made their entry, we heard a boom. I don't know if that was the infrastructure that was going or another explosion.
Again, there has been a second explosion.
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
All of a sudden I heard rumbling and we all started running away from it. The glass blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for 20 seconds.
It was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there. And another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
So I was real lucky. I don't know what happened to the people behind me when that blast occurred.
And was actually on the 78th floor of the second tower, and was evacuating the tower, and experienced all these explosions and made his way back down.
We presume because of the initial explosion, there may have been secondary explosions as well that were detonated in the building by these terrorists.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandeliers shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Eyewitnesses also reported that explosions had taken place in lower levels of both the North and South Tower.
They were having coffee in the World Trade Center when the first plane struck.
And all of a sudden it sounded like, I don't know where the subway is, but it sounded like a subway collision, a bomb, and it was just pounding, boom, 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 and I literally thought the subway had exploded. And
the ladies that are with me were in the World Trade Center in the first building and escaped through the lobby where they report they believe there was a bomb in the lobby.
Just get out of the tunnel and the blue.
The subway tunnel?
Yeah.
Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement, came down, all of a sudden the elevator blew up, smoke. I dragged the guy out, his skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
And when I got up to the concourse level, it was just like, like gunfire and then just 3 big explosions.
And even the turnstile was burnt and it was sticking up, and they just told us to run.
I heard the first explosion, and the elevator blew up.
And as we were coming out, we passed the lobby. There was no lobby. So I believe the bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds then the first plane hit.
Firefighter John Schroeder arrived in the lobby of the North Tower shortly after the first plane struck.
So we're standing there in the lobby, we're getting all together. All of a sudden, we hear... I look down to my right, and the elevators exploded, something out of like a Bruce Willis Die Hard movie. People just come running out of the elevators on fire, fireballed. I mean, it was like, what is going on here? There's something's up here. I mean, the plane's up there, now there's fire down here. People run around all on fire. This is crazy. So we were heading up to the 24th floor of the stairwell, and all of a sudden we heard, Mayday, Mayday, second plane, second plane. Swift, we're looking at each other like, come on, second plane? There's no way there's a second plane. Within seconds, our building got rocked. We got bounced around in the stairwell like pinballs, man. And we just said, you know what? Time to go. We got down to the lobby, and everything was blown out, exploded. Everything was... And we were the only ones in the lobby now. We're going, wait a second here. Where is everybody? Because the building was coming down the outside. They moved the command post to World Trade Center, too. So now we're like, we didn't get no, where is everybody? We were in the lobby. It looks like everything was exploded. Everything was gone. We're like, what is going on here? We didn't know. We were like, this is crazy. But for every window in the lobby to be exploded, I mean, them windows were like as thick as forget it. They were 2-3-inch glasses. Come on. They exploded out of the lobby. Something. It wasn't from the jet fuel. No way. The elevators exploded. They were down from the lobby. The lobby was over here. That should never have happened. Something would happen there, and that wasn't. We came down. It looked like a bomb went off in the lobby. There was no fire. It just looked like a bomb went off.
So, how was the largest and most puzzling architectural failure in history treated? The steel from the World Trade Center was mostly shipped overseas, eliminating any possibility of independent investigations. New York City's Department of Design and Construction contracted 4 companies for debris removal. Each was assigned a specific zone and controlled and monitored by a 3-person team. The operation was so controlled that in November, each dump truck used for removal of debris was fitted with a GPS locator. One driver took an extended lunch break and was dismissed from the job. By April 2002, over 185,000 tons of debris had been removed from Ground Zero. When the Twin Towers came down, they released over 500 tons of pulverized asbestos into Lower Manhattan, along with lead, barium, mercury, chromium, copper, and several other toxic chemicals. 425,000 cubic yards of concrete is pulverized. 600,000 square feet of glass is turned into dust. During the World Trade Center's construction, spray-on fireproofing comprised of concrete and asbestos was placed on the core columns. When asbestos was outlawed in 1971, they ceased this procedure at the 64th floor of the South Tower. The Port Authority eventually realized that the asbestos presented a problem, and demolition was not an option. In 1989, the Port Authority estimated the removal of asbestos from both the World Trade Center and LaGuardia Airport would have cost up to $1 billion. By 2001, the cost for the World Trade Center buildings alone would have met or exceeded $1 billion. This money would sadly not be needed. Although it was clear that the air was not safe to breathe, the public was urged to return to Lower Manhattan. Wall Street opened back up on September 17th, and children were allowed to go back to school. Firefighters, police, and rescue workers were allowed to toil in lethal conditions using paper masks from Home Depot, while government officials walked around in hazmat suits.
My name is John Field. I was hurt at Ground Zero during the cleanup. Wow, I was only there for 5 days before I was horribly injured, and I mean horribly injured. Leading up to that day, every day I was there, I complained that it was an unsafe workplace. Someone's going to get hurt. It just happened to be me. But I let everybody know that someone would get hurt. I was there for 5.5 days. Nobody told me to wear a mask once. Nobody gave a shit when that piece of steel altered my life. But like the thousands that are suffering and sick, I didn't roll over and play dead. And I know human life takes a backseat to the almighty dollar, and that's what makes this country roll and run, is the almighty dollar. But you guys somewhere along the line lost your credibility with me.
The Environmental Protection Agency, under direct orders from the White House, told New Yorkers that the air was safe to breathe. The administrator at the time, Christine Whitman, issued an internal memo on September 12th, declaring that all statements to the media should be cleared through the National Security Council before they are released.
So what happened? The White House changed EPA press releases to add reassuring statements and delete cautionary ones. September 13th, the EPA draft release, never released to the public, says EPA testing terrorized sites for environmental hazards. The White House changes that to EPA reassures public about environmental hazards. September 16th, the EPA draft says recent samples of dust on Water Street show higher levels of asbestos. The White House version? New samples confirm ambient air quality meets OSHA standards and is not a cause for public concern. And the White House leaves out entirely this warning, that air samples raise concerns for cleanup workers and office workers near Water Street. Why all these changes?
We were told that a desire to reopen Wall Street and national security concerns were the reasons for changing the press releases.
Christy Todd Whitman should be in jail for manslaughter. Christy, go to jail. Do not piss. Go. Just go to jail. Lock yourself up. When I said that, everybody said, don't you think that's a little harsh? And I said, no. 6 months later, every politician was saying it. Everybody was saying it like it was like saying hi. I pat myself on the back for having the nerve and the audacity to say that. She took orders from Condoleezza Rice, who took orders from the White House. They knew the air was bad. They lied. You should go to jail for manslaughter. For every time somebody dies. James Sedroga, Don Jones, Tim Keller, my close personal friend who I had to go to his funeral, Officer Borgia, and the many more that have died. I take this personally now. I take it real personal. You got an ex-mayor running for president who claims he helped us. Standing on a pile with a bullhorn, Mr. President and Mr. Giuliani, does not constitute helping anybody. At all.
The EPA's public release assured people that there was no significant level of asbestos in the air, and that instead of evacuating, they could clean their homes with a wet rag. More people will die post 9/11 from these illnesses than died on the day itself. By 2006, 70% of the 40,000 Ground Zero workers had developed respiratory problems. Hundreds of them had developed cancer, and over 80 had died. To make matters worse, a large majority of the victims from the World Trade Center were denied a decent burial and treated like garbage. A pile of approximately 500,000 tons of ash located at Fresh Kills Landfill, contains 1,148 victims that have yet to be identified. Mayor Bloomberg has repeatedly denied family members' requests, replying, "I've only visited my father's grave once." On top of all of this, human remains were discovered up to 400 feet away from the South Tower, on the roof of the Deutsche Bank building. 300 bone fragments were discovered between April 7th and 14th, 2006, and more are expected to be found.
All right, some new information coming in. Report from Associated Press of a large plane crashing in western Pennsylvania. This is according to officials at the Somerset County Airport. A large plane crashing in western Pennsylvania.
We had that plane crash. I'm sorry, go ahead, Skip.
Say it again. Repeat, please, Skip.
I'm saying somebody may have made that horrible decision to go ahead and take the plane down.
10:03 a.m., Shanksville, Pennsylvania. United Airlines Flight 93 allegedly plows into an abandoned strip mine at 580 miles per hour. 20 minutes flying time from Washington, D.C. Originally, the official story is that passengers on board the plane overthrew the hijackers and sacrificed themselves to prevent further casualties. The 9/11 Commission will later conclude that hijacker Ziad Jarrah, anticipating a cockpit overthrow, crashes the plane into the ground. Debris from Flight 93 was found considerable distances from the crash site.
The debris here is spread over a 3 to 4 mile radius, which has now been completely sealed off and is being treated, according to the FBI, as a crime scene. This is one of those cases where the pictures really do tell the story, that sort of the most horrifying aspect of this particular crash scene is how little debris is visible. That's really all you see is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris. There has been at least one report that the investigators out there, and there are hundreds of them, as I said tonight, have found nothing larger than a phone book.
Well, Darren, in the last hour or so, the FBI and the state police here have confirmed that they have cordoned off a second area about 6 to 8 miles away from the crater here where this plane went down. This is apparently another debris site, which raises a number of questions. Why would debris from the plane, and they identified it specifically as being from this plane, why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely. Almost all the debris found at this site is within 100 yards, 200 yards away. So it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate, of course.
It seems to me from covering a number of plane crashes on the scene that, if nothing else, you can say this is not typical for a plane crash to be spread across an area this large.
It certainly doesn't make sense because most of the debris has been found in a very compact area within 100 yards, 200 yards, maybe a little beyond that. And then all of a sudden they're telling us 6 miles away they have another concentration of debris. They say it's very small pieces. Most of these are very small pieces. Most of the pieces here are no bigger than the size of a briefcase, they say, and the pieces 6 miles away, maybe even smaller than that.
The 9/11 Commission concludes that the military was not informed of Flight 93 until 10:07, minutes after it had crashed.
We heard the explosion. Actually, our power had gone off, and then we felt a tremor. We had just gotten up, and the next thing I know, it sounded like a missile came across our house. I mean, they were going that fast. It was flying. It was coming from that direction. I have no idea what it was. Oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't the aircraft that crashed. No, it's hard for me to believe that they did not know about that aircraft until 10:07. That's difficult for me to believe.
Despite the discussions about military assistance, no one from FAA headquarters requested military assistance regarding United 93, nor did any manager at FAA headquarters pass any of the information it had about United 93 to the military.
A year after 9/11, military officials were telling an entirely different story, that Flight 93 was being tracked.
In the Pentagon Command Center, there's a report of another hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 93.
We received a report from the FAA that Flight 93 had turned off its transponder, had turned, and was now heading towards Washington, D.C. The decision was made to try to go intercept Flight 93.
The rules have changed. We could do something about it now.
Colonel Bob Marr is in command at the Northeast Air Defense Sector base in Rome, New York.
The words that I remember as clear as day was, "We will take lives in the air to preserve lives on the ground."
Marr orders his air controllers tell the pilots to intercept Flight 93.
United Airlines Flight 93 will not be allowed to reach Washington, D.C.
The closure time came and went, and nothing had happened. So you can imagine everything was very tense.
Flight 93 is about 175 miles north and west of Washington, flying over Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Up above, a fighter jet streaks by.
It was about 10:03 that the fighters reported that Flight 93 had crashed.
Eventually, of course, we never fired on any aircraft.
When you heard the plane was down without a shot being fired at it, do you remember what you said?
We just witnessed an act of heroism.
I want to tell you that we are getting word from New York right now that another building has collapsed. I understand that this is a 47-story building.
It's Building 7 of the World Trade Center, we understand, has collapsed in New York. And there you saw a video of it. Now, whether we don't even know whether this was something that was engineered for safety reasons or it just happened.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
In 1984, construction began on World Trade Center Building 7, a 47-story office building, 570 feet tall, and 300 feet away from the North Tower. It opened to the public in 1987 and housed offices for Department of Defense, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Internal Revenue Service. Building 7 was considered the Central Intelligence Agency's largest station outside of Washington, D.C., and was also the Secret Service's biggest field office. Numerous cases would be closed due to its destruction. On June 8, 1999, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management Command Center on the 23rd floor is opened.
The command center on the 23rd floor is bulletproof and bomb-resistant, with its own air supply and generators. It's linked to city airports, the Coast Guard, and the Pentagon. Computers will soon have detailed blueprints of every major building in New York City, as well as evacuation routes. Hurricanes and heat waves would be handled here, as well as terrorist attacks. Though New York officials say their facility is not impenetrable, they're confident it could handle even the worst crisis imaginable. Deborah Fayerick for CNN, New York.
The 50,000 square foot center has reinforced, bulletproof, and bomb-resistant walls, its own air supply and water tank, beds and showers, and 3 backup generators. It has countless monitors which oversee police and fire department responses, and it is staffed around the clock. Hours before the first plane would strike the World Trade Center, Building 7's alarm system would be placed on test status at 6:47 a.m. for a scheduled period of 8 hours. This normally occurs during maintenance, and any fire alarms from the building are disregarded. After the second plane strikes the South Tower, the building's power is shut off and its tenants are evacuated. The major fires in World Trade Center 7 were as follows. On the east face, between floors 11 and 12. On the north face, on floors 7 and 12. On the west face, between floors 29 and 30. Smoke obscures the entire south face of the building. By 3 p.m., Chief Daniel Nigro of the FDNY had set up a collapse zone around Building 7. After 4 p.m., news outlets began reporting that the building had collapsed.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
We've got some news just coming in, actually, that the Salomon Brothers building in New York, right in the heart of Manhattan, has also collapsed. Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani.
Jane, I think many of us, when we heard the news, perhaps on the radio earlier today, were completely flabbergasted by it and just couldn't comprehend it. I mean, it almost sounded too far-fetched. I was wondering what it's felt like for you being in Manhattan. Well, unfortunately, I think we've lost the line with Jane Stanley in Manhattan. Perhaps we can rejoin her and follow that up later.
Where did CNN and BBC get their information, especially considering the building was still standing directly behind their reporters? Building 7 burns over a number of floors and suffers structural damage to its south face before collapsing completely to the ground. Did anything occur inside the building that might cause a collapse?
We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. And I turned to Hesh. I said, this is it. We're dead. We're not going to make it out of here.
And we have Frank Uciardo back on the phone with us, Brenda, with some New York City officials. Frank, go ahead.
That's right. I'm standing here right now just off Broadway by City Hall with Michael Hess, who is the city's corporation counsel. Mr. Hess, you were trapped in, I believe, 7 World Trade Center. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was. I was up in the emergency management center on the 23rd floor, and when all the power went out in the building, another gentleman and I walked down to the 8th floor where there was an explosion, and we've been trapped on the 8th floor with smoke, thick smoke all around us for about an hour and a half. But the New York Fire Department, as terrific as they are, just came and got us out.
Governor Keene, may I ask another question, please? At 5:20 p.m. on September 11th, World Trade Center building number 7, 47-story modern frame steel skyscraper that no plane hit, collapsed into a neat little pile onto itself and exhibiting all the characteristics of controlled demolition. FEMA, in their investigation, didn't say that. They said that fire must have knocked it down, but they couldn't figure out how. Video evidence shows what appears to be explosive squids going up the side of the building from south to north or from bottom to top as the building collapsed. There was molten metal found in the basement of that building at temperatures that exceeded anything normal fire could cause. With all the confusion about what happened to Building 7, why is there not a word about the collapse of that building in the 911 Commission report?
We didn't see any evidence of the kind of thing you're talking about. We thought that was part of the tragedy of 9/11. The building collapsed later on. There was not a loss of life in that building, and it was not part of our report.
Not part of the report. Thank you, sir.
Governor?
Yeah.
In the aftermath of 9/11, citizens and politicians alike would demand that steps be taken to ensure such attacks never happen again. In late January 2002, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle receives calls from both President Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney, urging him to limit the investigation to the House and Senate committees. The administration would continue to oppose the investigation until November 2002, when Congress creates the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States to make a full and complete accounting of the circumstances surrounding the attacks. Democratic leaders concede several aspects after the White House threatens to create the commission by executive order, giving themselves considerable control. President Bush officially signs it into law November 27, 2002, and names Henry Kissinger as chairman of the 9/11 Commission. The Chicago Tribune puts it best. Kissinger is known more for keeping secrets from the American public than telling the truth. On December 13, 2002, Kissinger resigns from the 9/11 Commission due mostly to a congressional demand that he disclose his private business clients. It would later be revealed that Kissinger was a chief advisor to the Bush administration regarding the Iraq War, a lie which has now cost more American lives than 9/11 itself. Thomas Kean and Lee Hamilton are named as chairman and vice chairman of the 9/11 Commission. By December 16, 2002, the 10 initial members of the 9/11 Commission have been appointed. Onto the stage. And the man missing from this picture? Philip Zelikow, Executive Director. He would shape both the commission and its final report. The 9/11 Commission begins its investigation with a time frame of 18 months and a starting budget of $3 million. January 27, 2003. The 9/11 Commission holds its first hearing in Washington, D.C. Vice Chairman Lee Hamilton will claim a few days later, "We're not interested in trying to assess blame. We do not consider that part of the Commission's responsibility." March 26, 2003. The Bush administration denies the Commission's request for an additional $11 million in funding. 3 days later, the Commission is offered $9 million, and they accept. In April 2004, President Bush agrees to testify before the 9/11 Commission, but only if Vice President Dick Cheney joins in. Why did they insist on appearing together?
The 9/11 Commission wants to ask us questions. That's why we're meeting, and I look forward to meeting with them and answering their questions.
I was asking why you're appearing together rather than separately, which was their request.
Because it's a good chance for both of us to answer questions that the 9/11 Commission is looking forward to asking us, and I'm looking forward to answering them.
On April 29th, 2004, behind closed doors, President Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney appear together before the 9/11 Commission for approximately 3 hours. They are not placed under oath, their testimony is not recorded, and the Commission's notes are subject to White House censorship.
President, as you know, a lot of critics suggested that you wanted to appear jointly with the Vice President so that you two could keep your story straight or something.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what you think of the value of appearing together and how you would answer those critics?
Yeah, first of all, look, I mean, if we had something to hide, we wouldn't have met with them in the first place. I came away good about the session. I think they found it to be useful. Yeah, Adam.
Mr. President,
Yes.
don't you think that the families deserve to have a transcript or to be able to see what you
Adam,
said?
you asked me that question yesterday. I got the same answer, yeah.
May 19th, 2004, Rudolph Giuliani testifies before the 9/11 Commission.
We will now hear from our first witness, the very distinguished former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. Mayor Giuliani, would you please rise and raise your right hand so I can place you under oath?
And the fact that so many of them interpreted it that way kept a much calmer situation and a much better evacuation. These people. I
would please ask.
My son was murdered!
You are simply wasting time at this point, which should be used for questions. Please.
Thomas Kean and Lee Hamilton will later claim in their book, Without Precedent, that they were too soft on Mayor Giuliani. One of the questions they failed to ask was who warned him that the South Tower was going to collapse.
Mr.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
I can, Peter.
Are you talking about did you go immediately to the Office of Emergency Management?
I went down to the scene and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, and we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we could actually get out of the building.
Who didn't warn everyone in the building?
I admire that greatly, and I think that may
Dead.
Very well be one of the reasons for your leadership and your cooperation in this
commission. 2 minutes to rebut. Let's ask the real question. My brother's a fireman. I want to know why 300 firemen died. And I've got some real questions. Let's ask some real questions. Is that unfair?
The 9/11 Commission would release its final report on July 22nd, 2004, and closed its doors on August 21st.
So the 9/11 Commission was a cover-up. The question is what it was covering up. The charitable explanation is gross negligence, malfeasance, misfeasance, and what you call it, okay?
If you can't read all 571 pages of the report, in August 2006, the 9/11 Report comic book was released. It should tell you all you need to know. On the morning of September 11th, 19 Arabs boarded 4 commercial airliners at 3 different airports and crashed them into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, with 0 military intervention. Or, we have been and continue to be lied to about the events of September 11th, and that elements within the United States government and mainstream media continue to cover up the truth. These are the same people that lied about weapons of mass destruction. They endorsed a lie that's killed several 100,000 innocent people overseas. Could they also endorse a lie that killed almost 3,000 innocent people in our own country? Our entire foreign and domestic policy has been based upon the events of September 11th. It has enabled the passage of Patriot Act 1 and 2, established the Department of Homeland Security, facilitated the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, and used to pass the Military Commissions Act, which officially ended habeas corpus.
Habeas corpus in Latin means you have the body. It's a provision in the law where no one can just scoop up someone, put them in a black hole, and keep them there without that person having the right to appeal to a court and say, you have the body, now what do you charge this person with, and what redress does he or she have?
As well as domestic surveillance, all in the name of fighting terrorism. And who ends up paying for all this? You do. Your children do. When President Bush entered office, he inherited a $284 billion surplus. His administration is now responsible for 4 out of the top 5 deficits in history. The 5th place belongs to his father. As of November 2nd, 2005, the Bush administration had borrowed more from foreign nations than all previous administrations combined. From 1776 to 2000, 42 presidents borrowed a total of $1.01 trillion from foreign governments and institutions. From 2001 to 2005, the Bush administration alone borrowed $1.05 trillion. Where does this money go? The government designed by the people, for the people, has turned its back on us. Or have we turned our backs on it? They spy on us. They torture and imprison innocent civilians. Ask yourself, what's happening? Where are we headed? And would we be here today without 9/11?
Will somebody please tell us who's in charge?
We need order. We can't stand this new world slaughter. It reeks of oil seats and bloody handshakes. U.S. interests and war profiteers. Our life is here in the belly of the beast. Where thieves kill the innocent and pray for peace. Slaughter for the chief commander. So we're at the White House steps, demanding answers, but they don't got none. We've got few choices: protest or pick up shotguns. We're so stressed, we know the watcher might arrest us, though we're the key for talking. And we ain't made no death threats. Feds upset, so our phones infested. Think John Lennon resurrected, speaking truth to power till we have no breath left. We say no more, we're gonna fight back. We want the truth out, we want our rights back. Loose change, change is loose, no stopping now. Change is loose, no stopping now. We say no more, we're gonna fight back. We want the truth out, we want our rights back. Loose change, change is loose, no stopping now. Change is loose, no stopping now. We keep our mouths and minds open, hoping we can change the world. Media blackout, still we don't act out. We've been civilized despite the killing. You call yourselves patriots, label us villains. My comrades and nomads that are born free think it's rich kids, poor kids, lawyers and teachers. Dads, moms, past war veterans, peddling the truth. We ain't settling, the proof is clear as Watergate. You got a lot of hate trying to charm us with a plot of hate. What are you, an asshole? Your war's illegal, your cause is evil. You're born people as written up for the sequel. You're a sicko psycho, we've seen the proof. You can't intimidate the world from delivering truth. We're bigger than you, 40 million plus. Your guns ain't big enough to make us hush. We say no more, we're gonna fight back. We want the truth out, we want our rights back. Loose change, change is loose, no stopping now. Change is loose, no stopping now. We say no more, we're gonna fight back. We want the truth out, we want our rights back. Loose change, change is loose, no stopping now. Change is loose, no stopping now. We do this for the lives lost, devoured by evil, for the sake of the memory of innocent people, engulfed by the gluttony of hooligans who leave the world in ruins. Men here to do us in, but there's just a few of them and more of us. We warriors on the quest for justice. We crush the lies, trust only the facts. Just open your eyes. Who really attacked my feelings exactly? Facts be lacking on the hijacking, synchronized war games, facilitated plane crashes. And they wonder why we keep asking questions. Am I lesson, lady liberty, like it's a profession? So here we are, the infantry. We the people simply need to start a revolution of our minds, and eventually the crime of the century will finally be solved. Until then, we stand tall and say no more. We're gonna fight back. We want the truth out, we want our rights back. Loose change, change is loose, no stopping now. Change is loose, no stopping now. We say no more, we're gonna fight back. We want the truth out, we want our rights back. Loose change, change is loose, no stopping now. Change is loose, no stopping now.